Happy Monday, my friends. Today I wanted to jump on and talk to you about time, and specifically time and expectations around time of accomplishing our goals and how long things take when we're talking about our health and nutrition. So let's dive in. Now, the reason that I want to talk about this is because I think it's actually one of the biggest reasons that people end up quitting on their journey to better health and fitness. They start with a new goal and they get super motivated, but they set a very short timeline of how long it's going to take. And because that timeline is so short, when they don't accomplish that, they feel like they failed and said, what's the point? And to be honest, I can't say that I'm not guilty of this as well. I've done it multiple times before for myself, and unfortunately sometimes with clients. As I've gone through this more and more, I've realized that erring on the side of something taking longer is probably the smarter and more realistic approach. That being said, it's also good to note that, when we talk about health and fitness, it really is a lifetime endeavor. We get really hyper fixated on what happens in the next 3 months. How long does it take me to lose the next 10 pounds? How long does it take me to get to a certain number on a certain lift? Those kind of things. But in the back of our mind, we're all wanting to live long and healthy lives. So why are we trying to create a 3-month goal when we want to do this forever? And it's not to say that those shorter goals aren't important, but it can't be the one and only focus because, again, a lot of people end up missing the mark and then giving up and then starting back over 6 months or 9 months down the road. And I think that there's a nice balance of having miniature goals to work towards, but always keeping in mind that our long-term goal or our overarching goal is just to be healthy for as long as we possibly can, which isn't just 3 months. Now, let's start with the application of how to do this correctly. And we're going to just assume that the goal in all of these conversations is fat loss, but I'm going to start with the first scenario, which is the one that I tend to start with most people on or work with most people on, which is they're coming to me with a fat loss goal. They are under muscled, their calories are pretty low, and we need to go into a reverse diet phase. Again, a reverse diet phase is the phase of training where we're intentionally trying to fire up your metabolism, make it so you can eat more food without gaining a bunch of extra fat and gain some muscle. Now, what a lot of people will think is, cool, I need to do this for 60 to 90 days, then I can go right into a fat loss phase, the fat's going to melt off, and then everything's going to be good in 3 to 6 months. And in most cases, that's pretty far from the truth. What we have to really zoom out and look at is how long have I been kind of misaligned with my goals, meaning how long have I been eating those low calories? How long have I been potentially overtraining? How long have I not been checking the boxes that I know I need to check? Because that's a very good indication of this is probably going to take longer than you think. Just like it didn't take 3 months to get to where we currently are, it's probably going to take more than 3 months to get to where we want to go. And yes, we can reverse diet in 60 to 90 days, but what that doesn't usually accommodate for is the period of maintenance that has to happen for another 3 to 6 months sometimes. And what maintenance is just sitting at a steady calorie rate without trying to necessarily gain or lose any weight on the scale. Now, why you need to do this is because we need to give our body time to adjust and adapt. And where people tend to go wrong, or what I see people get most frustrated with, is they go through the reverse diet phase. And it can be incredibly challenging because sometimes in a reverse diet phase, you do gain a little bit of weight. And during that phase, all they're thinking about is the fat loss phase. And as soon as they get their calories up high, they're like, cool, let's go into a fat loss phase. They do so, and their body stalls out. They don't actually lose any weight. And if this is sounding familiar, it's because you didn't give your body enough time to adapt to the calories that you worked up to. Now, the really hard part about this, not only from a coaching perspective, but also just from an individual perspective, is there's not really a set amount of time. It takes different for each person. And again, I like to try to look back at how long were you at lower calories, but it really is going to be different from person to person. at a minimum, I would say 6+ weeks, 6 to 8 weeks is usually what I would hold at that new maintenance calorie before considering entering a fat loss phase. But again, I understand that that's a lot easier said than done, because it can be very frustrating feeling like you have this goal that you want to accomplish and then kind of not seeing any progress for that long amount of time. But when we zoom out and go back to the original conversation, it's about what is our true timeline here. Well, our true timeline is healthy for the rest of our life. So if I zoom in on a 6-month period, I may feel like I'm really failing. But if I zoom back out to lifelong success, then it's actually a very short amount of time to be in that uncomfortable position to set myself up for success for the rest of my life. And that's why I think it's so important to set those realistic expectations around how long it's going to take to accomplish your goals and how long you're going to be working at these things. And then another scenario or another area that I see a lot of people struggle with is when they are in a fat loss phase and how long that actually takes. You know, in a ideal world, when everything is aligned, your metabolism is really good, your training's really good, your stress is low, your sleep is good, you're making all the right choices with your nutrition, you probably are going to see somewhere between like 1.5 and 2.5 pounds of fat loss a week. And again, that's all things being completely perfect. Now, so many people go in and think, I'm going to do all of this in the span of 30 days or 60 days. And it's like, no, we need, again, look at 14 to 16 weeks for one fat loss phase. That might not even take you all the way to your goal. And it's hard to kind of swallow that pill because you get so excited about the end result, the end result, the end result, the end result. And that end result is just a number on the scale or how you look or whatever that may be. But again, what will happen is people will get so worked up about getting there as quickly as possible. They start making really poor decisions, i.e. they cut their calories way too low. They start adding in a lot of calories or a lot of cardio, sorry. They start overstressing the body. And in the short term, they see very rapid response and change. But then they plateau super hard and they never actually get to the finish line. And then they have to spend even more time repairing the damage that they've done in that period. And it takes even longer to get to that end term goal. So what I think is really important to note and remember with this, and what I try to remind clients and myself of, is that overall, the long-term goal is to be successful for life. And that may mean there's some periods of discomfort or where I feel like things are moving slower than I would like them to. And that's okay. That's part of the process. The other thing about that is there really is only one way to do this right if we keep that goal. It's not the fastest way, it's the right way. So don't make the poor decisions that are going to lead you to crash and burn later. But something to remember, even if you do make those mistakes, the only actual way to fail is to quit trying, right? We might have, or I will say we are going to have setbacks during this process. And some of those setbacks are going to be for an extended period of time. You know, they could be 6 months, a year, 2 years, depending on what's going on in life. But as long as you keep trying and keep doing the right things, eventually it will move in the right direction and you will accomplish your goals. So what I want you to take away from this video is, one, remember that things are probably going to take longer than you want them to, and that's okay because we're working on a lifelong goal. And two, even if you do screw up or you stumble and you fall, that's totally okay. The only thing that means failure is if you give up. So let's go into this week really kind of being realistic with our goals and expectations, and also understanding that stumbling here and there is going to happen, and that's totally okay. Just don't give up. All right, guys, have a great week.